it's time to admit everyone. You ready?
Oh, yeah, sure. Let's go. Rock and roll.
Okay, here we go.
Hey there.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm just waiting for the last few people to join.
Wow, big group.
Yeah, big group. Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to this part of the Embodied Connection Conference. My name is Marisha, and I am here to introduce Dr. Albert Wong. Albert is Director of Somatic Psychology at John F. Kennedy University. He's a leading clinician and educator in the field of somatics, and he's the founder of Somatopia. And he will be talking now on how connection heals trauma and why it terrifies us too. And I'm particularly excited because I just realized that I'd practiced circling with Albert quite a bit a few years ago and I hadn't made the connection. So really great to see you again, and thank you for joining us, and looking forward to what you have to share with us now. Enjoy, everybody.
Yeah. It was really sweet. I wasn't going to say anything because it was one of those things where I recognized Marisha, and because she's a facilitator on Circle Anywhere, but I wasn't sure if she remembered me, and it was just, well, it's just so nice to be remembered, you know. And yeah, and I've always enjoyed kind of the circles I've been in with you. So thanks for welcoming me, and thanks for creating this lovely event, right? Co-creating it, yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, so I'm just noticing, and I'm just doing my own noticing practice, just trying to arrive. And you know, I can see some of your faces. There's many faces I can't see, but I'm just scrolling through and just trying to get a feel of the group, right? And mostly as I just look through, I feel happy and a little bit amazed. Like I have windows into so many worlds. And I just feel honored and grateful that you're choosing to spend your time here with me. And yeah, and if you want, just like people are doing, you can say, hey, from London, or hey, from wherever. There's something, at least that I find, about kind of orienting in space, right? When I know where people are, you know, are from. So it's like all around the world, Oslo, Paris, Colombia. And I just kind of am imagining little lines of light going across the globe, just connecting us everywhere. Maybe that should be the name of the platform, Connect Everywhere. Yeah, so I'm feeling excitement, a little anxiousness. You know, I think every time I'm in front of people, I'm both excited and terrified, like, oh my God, will you love me? Will I fail? Will I make a fool of myself? And it really feels like, will I survive, right? Because I so want you to like me. I so want to connect with you. I want to feel that, I don't know, kind of being held and received and connected to you as a group. And I think I'm also terrified that it might not happen, right? Which is kind of the theme of today, right? The theme of kind of our longing for connection, how connection can help heal trauma, right? Even in this moment, maybe a little of my own historical fear of being unseen or dropped or not enough could be remedied, right? Just by you being here, connecting with, and being willing to care about and see me. So thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the format of this whole conference is really beautiful. There's a beautiful intermingling of kind of experiential practice sessions and these kind of group, community sessions that are maybe a little bit more, I don't know, formalized or didactic. If you have questions, I'll try and kind of keep a tab on the chat. It goes by a little quick, so please be forgiving if I miss them. Yeah, it's interesting. I'll just share that I love this practice. I love the practice of connection, and it goes by many different names and many different forms. And I'll also say that I do it, and then, and I guess the word that I'll say is I get blown out, right? Like I'll do it, I'll come close, I'll practice like connection for a while, and then like something will happen, and I get blown out, like I get terrified and I get scared, and then it's almost too much, but I keep coming back. And at least my hope in this presentation is to create maybe some thoughts. I don't know if they're prescriptive, but just some thoughts about how to connect in ways that are attuned or sensitive to maybe each of our histories, right? Of where we come from, and trauma if we have trauma, not that you have to have had trauma, but so just so I can get a feel for the group, I'm curious, how many of you guys have done either circling or T group or authentic relating or group process like prior to kind of this conference? Like, and you can either say, okay, so a number of people, but some people no. Okay, so some people yes and some people no. And how many people have not done it before, right? So a number of people have not. Okay, also, okay, I see some hands raised. Okay, so this is a whole new world on some level for many of you. Okay, it's okay. Wow. So there's a lot of people who are okay. Yeah, that's really fascinating to me. Okay. And then I guess how many of you have experienced connection in relationships that's felt like deeply nourishing and maybe even healing, right? Where it's been not just a connection, but it felt like it's been whole making for you, right? Okay, I see some hands raised, and then there's a debate about whether you should raise your hand or not. It's sweet and cute. Yeah, okay. And then I guess I have the question, how many of you have, yeah, okay, so some people yes and some people no, they haven't felt that. Okay. And how many of you have, ever felt like in the context of relationship that you've felt really wounded, maybe even, hurt or traumatized? I don't know if that's true. Okay, so yeah, I see quite a few hands and nods kind of going up. Okay. Well, okay, so you guys are, it sounds like maybe, this is relevant. This is relevant. Okay. So, okay, here we go. Now I can see the whole chat kind of as it goes. So yeah, all right. Well, so this is this little, we have about an hour together. Oh, I am very sweet. Thank you. Yeah. So we have about an hour together. My hope is to help us kind of learn a little bit about trauma, how trauma happens, and how we can use each other to help us heal. And maybe some of these practices that we do in community or in group, and try and make them at least maybe a little sweeter or more kind, because sometimes, at least that's, I think there's challenge in when you start to connect with other people. Sometimes it's sweet and sometimes it can get a little sticky or tricky, and so how can we learn to navigate that territory? Okay. So, oh, well, thanks. Thanks for all the love sent my way. All right. So, it's, I've, yeah. Well, I'll just, I'll share this quote. I was going to share, yeah. Yeah, I'll do this. I know I'm kind of a little bit hopping about, but let me just, okay. So here we are. Okay. So this is the topic, how connection heals trauma and why it terrifies us too. Okay. And then we've just kind of gone through a lot of these questions, right? How many people have done it? So we've just gone that. And then, and how many haven't, right? So we've just done that. And we've gone through here. Okay, so we've done all that. And what I really wanted to get to was just the next quote, which is this: trauma happens in relationships, so it can only be healed in relationships, right? So, we get hurt and injured in relationships, and sometimes that's where we have to go in order to find healing, to become whole. And I think that's what sometimes draws us to relationships and draws us to connection. We're going to switch. Alanis Morissette is a singer. She's not a healing professional, but I like that quote. That's a fair comment, Michael. Thank you. That's true. Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of the current attachment thinking, which is a little bit more formalized, does seem to suggest that we need people to heal, right? We need people to heal. But yeah, point well taken. Thank you. Yeah, I can't slide one by you. All right. So so let's see. All right. Well, what I'm going to first talk about is just the notion of what is trauma, right? Like, what is trauma? Right. And if you have thoughts or ideas about what that might be, you can type them kind of in the chat. Yeah. Okay, I know, and I hear. It's kind of, yeah. There's a kind of a hyperbole to Alanis Morissette's quote, but yeah. So yeah, here it is. Yeah, trauma is too much, right? Too fast, right? Emotional scars, pain. Okay, too soon. Yeah, so that's some classic notions. Unbearable stress, right? Yeah, people talking about the nervous system. Okay, so there's, yeah, all of these things. Okay, everybody's kind of talking about like things that are really, you guys are, I'm noticing just kind of my own desire to keep up with everybody and how challenging that is. So my own overwhelm here, but appreciating, right, kind of everything that people are saying, right? Kind of there's a lot in terms of trauma, okay? So I'm gonna draw a little picture that if you've been around the block in terms of the trauma world, you may have seen, right? So it goes like this, okay? And the basic notion is, if this is our level of nervous system activation, right. What typically happens, and this is just like time, kind of going forward, we get activated and then kind of we calm down, right? And that's kind of how it should go. And, you know, this is the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay. And this range here is called the window of tolerance. Okay. The window of tolerance. And, you know, when we are activated to a certain level, like excited or maybe a little bit stressed, but able to, you know, meet the challenge, and we meet it, and then we can calm ourselves down, we're doing well. We're within our window of tolerance, you know. But when it becomes too much, too fast, too soon, right? Like a stressor comes and we get activated and we're trying to deal with it, but we can't, and then it hits past this level, right? Kind of beyond what we call beyond our window of tolerance. Okay. This becomes the domain of, you know, the thinking about, that's where trauma happens. Trauma lives here. Okay. And, you know, some technical terms like, you know, this is hyperarousal. We become locked and stuck in overactivation. Okay, like, you know, anxiousness, okay, or kind of hypervigilance, all of these things. Okay, so that's kind of one way in which to think about trauma. So, you know, and when we enter in, okay, I'm unmuted now. Okay, great. That's all good. No worries. So, so one thing that happens when we enter into this area, this domain, is that, our experience starts to, let me just fix this. Okay. Our experience, which should be kind of a coherent experience, starts to separate out. Okay. So, so normally, and I hope this isn't too technical, but there's this notion of the constituents of experience, all right? So there's sensation, images, affect, behavior, and meaning. Okay, and this comes from the work of Peter Levine in somatic experiencing. Okay, so the notion is that, okay, here I am in the world connecting with you guys, and I can feel kind of my body, kind of a little anxiousness. Okay, so there's a little bit of buzzing in sensation. There's an affect of anxiousness with that. The meaning that I'm giving is like, okay, I'm wanting to do a good job, but I'm not sure. Okay, my behavior is, okay, well, I'm trying to reach for you guys, and I have an image of, yeah, kind of Mauritius, kind of kind attention, and so I feel a little bit of relief, right? So there's a notion that, you know, as I'm here, I am connected to all of these things as a whole experience, right? I'm feeling kind of all of this, right? Yeah, kind of a whole percept. It's kind of like experience is made up of all of these different aspects, right? I'm having a sensation, connected with a feeling, connected with a meaning that I'm making of it, connected with behavior, and then I have these images of you guys, right? And, you know, so this is what kind of, if you imagine this little pentagon, it actually kind of this pentagon of experience, like it should go up, you know, kind of like, oh, okay, now I'm sensing something a little bit more intensely, but I'm still kind of behaving, you know, to try and make it work, right? And then, okay, and then now, okay, it's working. And then it kind of goes, you know, continues all the way down, right? It's all, the pentagon stays together, right? But once you get up here, what ends up happening is, oh, I'm going to close that. Oh, that works. Okay, no wonder. Okay, once you're up here, the pentagon starts to fall apart, right? So I'm going to call this fractionation, right? And that's what happens in trauma, right? So the idea is, normally I would have my kind of anxious, buzzy feeling here, and I have the meaning, I'm a little scared, but it's okay, it's tolerable, and I reach out, I'm trying to make it work okay, and I have the images. But if it gets traumatic, it's too much. The next thing I know is, I don't know what's going on anymore. Like I'm losing my capacity to connect with meaning. So it's almost like that gets broken off, right? And my body goes numb, right? I'm losing my sensation. So I don't have that sensation. And the images are no longer like complete. All I see are just flashes, right? Of whatever it might be, right? And then I become frozen in my behavior. So the pieces that are supposed to hang together stop hanging together, right? So that's trauma. Once we kind of go beyond this window of tolerance, fractionation starts to happen. Things start to tear apart, right? Experience stops being coherent. And that's why some of this basic circling practice of, okay, what do you notice? Well, I notice this in my body. I notice this in my feeling. I notice this in my thought, right? I'm having this image or I'm feeling this impulse. That slowly starts to weave together or reconnect, right? The parts that have been fractionated out, right? So there's a way in which even that basic noticing practice starts to maybe piece together like, oh, I'm noticing this buzzing in my chest and I don't really understand it, right? Oh, actually that's fear. Okay, the little pieces come together again, right? And so and then I can kind of put it in its right place. Yeah. Yeah, and it's really true. There's that good point about hypoarousal as well. So there's a lot of good thinking, there. There's so much to cover. It's hard to cover everything, but thanks for the intelligent commentary. So this is part of kind of what creates trauma. So how do we kind of help heal trauma? And some of it is this process of reconnecting the dots, like bringing the pieces that were apart together again. And typically, when you're in this phase of hyperarousal, and we're only going to kind of deal with hyperarousal rather than hypoarousal, that's another category. It's actually hard to think. It's hard to piece things together again. It's hard to consolidate memory. It's hard to kind of let the pieces find each other. And so typically what we want to do is we want to either kind of decrease arousal or increase resourcing, increasing our window of tolerance, right? So you can think of like, can we try to figure out a way to raise this bar a little bit so that we can put this back into our window of tolerance, and these broken fragments of feeling or being can find each other again, right? And once kind of, if we are able to expand our window of tolerance or get other people to help us co-regulate, right? Then this kind of process of self-reconnecting can start to happen a bit. Okay. So, yeah, so the noticing game, I think, is really fundamental and foundational, and it's one of these ways of connecting to self that can, in its own way, help bring back these broken pieces, these pieces that get fragmented off from trauma, where we just have the image of kind of broken glass and the sound of a dark, a car car door, and then, whatever that is, and we can kind of bring them back into, oh, I'm feeling terrified and I want to run, right? Okay, so co-regulation can be one piece, and the connecting to self can be, really important. Okay. Now, let's see. Now, there's the other piece, though, which I think is really important, which is the relational aspect, which happens frequently in circling, right? And so let me see if I can, oh, there it is. Let me clear the whiteboard. Okay, so there's a relational piece also. So the whole notion of kind of this, so you can think of it as kind of this, as at an individual level, right? Your experience, so you can do that. Or you can think of it kind of in a relational context, right? Where it's, close that, okay. So me and you, right? Kind of together, right? So we're connected. Suppose we're in a relational context, okay? And this is how much stress or activation is in the system, okay? And we can maybe together kind of, okay, challenging things have happened, but we're still together as a team working on it. Actually, it's gotten really challenging, but we're working really hard, and we were able to navigate that and stay connected and navigate through that, okay? And we didn't fractionate, we didn't split, okay? But if the activation becomes too great, right? If it becomes too great, the same thing happens, okay? And okay, it becomes stressful, we're working on this project, we're working together, okay, it's gotten really stressful, and now all of a sudden, okay, it's really stressful and you are not doing a good job, right? And you're really messing it up, and I don't know why you are kind of, messing it up so bad. And the whole notion is that there's no longer that sense of connectedness, right? There's a fractionation that happens, this time at the systemic level, right? In the interrelational process, right? It's over, the relationship gets fractionated, just like trauma fractionates kind of an individual self, right? Kind of overwhelm into a system fractionates the system. It sends it into hyperarousal, right? And then the center does not hold. Like I start to blame you, you're bad, you're the one, and then there's kind of distance and separation, right? And that's a certain kind of relational trauma. Now, this happens, right? And for many of us, sometimes it happened or happens with our early experiences, right? In terms of childhood even, right? So sometimes what happens is, this could be me with an intimate partner, it could be me with maybe kind of a mother, or a father, right? Where I'm depending upon them. Okay, it's stressful, but you're still there. Okay, I'm okay. But maybe, okay, you dropped me, and maybe I haven't ever forgotten that, and maybe I haven't ever been able to get over that, or whatever it might be. And so there I am, kind of me, kind of, I'll just say that represents me as a fragment of myself, right? And it's almost like there's a ghost, there's this whole notion of phantom limb, like there's a seeking the missing something, right? Seeking the missing something, and a search for that, a search for the missing something. And sometimes there's somebody else, right, who is their own fractionated part, who is seeking their own missing something, right? And sometimes you can find each other, right? And then that can be really beautiful. And when you find somebody whose edge of hurt kind of matches yours, sometimes it can feel like you're coming home to yourself, right? You know, when we meet people in the world who, oh, you get me, or there's some missing piece that I've looked for so long, and there you are, right? It can be really beautiful. So, so when that can happen, there can be kind of a reattachment, or sometimes they call an earned secure attachment, right? An earned secure attachment, right? So that's the name for what it is like when you find somebody who is consistent and reliable, who sees you, hears you, right? Kind of is a safe haven for you and a secure base. Okay. So, but a lot of times, and this is what I see, is when people kind of are in groups, sometimes they either, and through no fault of their own, but they're activated. You know, they're in this place of hyperarousal, right? And they're not able to kind of take in new information. Their nervous system is overwhelmed, and so they can't find kind of that missing piece, right? So I think what I think we sometimes need is a little bit of kind of either kind of increasing the resources or calming the system. Okay, I'll tell a little story, and this is just kind of to mix it up a little bit, and also just check in with how people are doing. Let me just do that a little bit just to be sensitive. How are people doing with this? Is this kind of making sense? Is this kind of going in? Like people are nodding? Yes. Okay. Yeah, great. Okay, people are good. Okay. Oh, see, people are kind. Okay, people are liking it. Ah, this is my own insecure attachment kind of. So you guys are doing my work for me? Yeah, thank you. Okay, deep breath. Yeah, thank you. Okay, super helpful. Okay, thanks so much. Well, you guys are really sweet. Okay. Yeah, people are liking it. Oh, so, oh, that's sweet. Okay. So I'll take this moment just to share a little story, which was, and this was actually not a formal circling practice. This was a Quaker meeting. I'm not even a Quaker, but my uncle is, and he brought me to the Santa Monica Friends meeting, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And all they did is sit in silence. All they did is sit in silence. And then when somebody feels moved to speak, they speak. And I had never done that before. And it was really strange because as I sat in silence, I had the strangest thought, which was, nobody is likely to hit me here. And I just started bawling, you know, we were just sitting in silence, and you know, nobody is likely to hit me here. And it felt really profound, you know, and there was a way in which I didn't even realize I had that fear, this ongoing abiding fear when I was with people that something really bad could happen, right? But it was something about it being safe enough or still enough and silent enough with people where something opened up in me that allowed that thought to come forward. It was safe enough to be scared, you know, in a strange sense. Like it was safe enough to let myself feel, wow, okay, both terrified but also relieved, you know. And yeah, so and there was something about the structure and the form which allowed that, right? It allowed me to see people as not necessarily potential sources of threat, right? And So that's just a little sidebar story, which enabled a little piece of a corrective experience for me. Okay. So just kind of using that story as a little bit of a model or a guide, we're going to go into, I guess, the question of what can we do? Yeah. Thanks for receiving my experience. Yeah. So what can we do in terms of kind of our relational practice, which is, and I recognize that some of you guys, you know, are new to this whole world, but I'll tell you what sometimes happens, and this is just my experience, and Mauricia has probably a lot more experience in this world, but you know, my guess is that she could confirm some of this, is that people show up and people come with a good heart, right? People come frequently seeking something, like seeking connection, and they open and it's beautiful and it's like, wow. And then they hit an edge where something gets triggered and is terrifying, and they don't know if they can stay, you know, and it's too much, it's overwhelming, you know, and then sometimes it's too overwhelming and they have to leave. Right? It's too overwhelming and they have to leave. There's an old saying in group process that whoever comes to group, somehow your father shows up, right? This notion that kind of your history kind of is present. You know, even you can run, but you know, wherever you go, there you are, right? These things like, you know, I was in a Quaker meeting, right? And, you know, there wasn't any threat, but it was, the echo of it was right there, okay? And so there's the potential or the promise of kind of healing, right? But, you know, there's also the challenge, right? Because groups, you know, and I did it with me and you, right? Kind of, but it can also happen, you know, with groups, right? You know, and sometimes I like to represent groups just by, you know, sometimes like there's people in a room and they're trying to connect to each other, right? And, you know, and sometimes they are successful and they form a group. And then sometimes the group explodes, like the group, like it becomes like, you know, like a food fight. Sometimes I've had those experiences. So it's like, okay, this is a nice, sweet group. I'm going to be able to connect to people. And then like somebody starts to throw something. It's like, oh my friggin' God. And then I get triggered, right? And I go into hyper arousal, okay? And it just stays there, okay? And then you know, then it becomes harder to do, you know, I become separate sometimes from other people in the group, right? And kind of parts of me that long to find that fit, right? That kind of the person who is going to see me or hear me or know me, right? Becomes harder, okay? So, so here's some notions from the trauma literature that I'm just going to invite us to think about if or as we do this practice, okay? And so one notion is the notion of titration, okay? So this is just a common notion in the trauma literature, which is that, and not to say that you have to have a trauma framework when you do these practices. I mean, because if you stick around long enough kind of in this work, some people don't really seem to adhere to some notions of kind of titration or going slow. I think, you know, some people really want to go kind of full speed ahead, you know, kind of pedal to the metal, authentic truth at all costs, right? Rather than kind of gentle slowness. And I'll just say, and not placing a value judgment on it, but that in those circumstances, those are what I would call untitrated circumstances. So those are circumstances where there isn't slowness, where there isn't kind of like in trauma work, you're supposed to kind of slow is fast, right? And that kind of almost, gentle is more likely to get you to reconnection or wholeness or completion. So all the work is about kind of going at the kind of edge, but at the near edge, right? Not necessarily the far edge of kind of connective expressions and truth. Okay, so that's just kind of one thing from the trauma literature. Another thing I'll just mention is the notion of resonance. Okay, and that's the notion that whenever kind of, and it's interesting. Once I started doing these kind of images, I started to maybe draw people like this, which is kind of funny because you're two little people with kind of missing parts. But yeah, so the notion is that when you're kind of with people, and my teacher, John Heider, who was one of the earlier, this was it wasn't called circling back then, it was just a kind of group or encounter group, that kind of thing. But, he said a group field is what it's like to be with people in a room when it's relatively quiet, right? There's a feeling that a group has, together when it's relatively quiet, relatively still, kind of an atmosphere, right, that to the group. And if you can tune into the group field and connect with that and start to resonate with the whole, right, then that really helps to hold the connection together, right? Because the problem here with these two kind of fragmented parts that are separate is that they're not really resonating with each other, right? They're separate from each other. There's no connection. But what you want to try to do is you want to create that resonant field. You want to create the listening, the co-listening, right? So kind of just listening for that connection, listening for connection with an attitude of awareness, right? The noticing stuff. And then also acceptance, okay? So those are two kind of pieces that are valuable. So resonance, kind of feeling that kind of relational connection. Yeah. The other thing that I would just recommend, and this might be, I don't know, for those of you who are new, and a lot of you are newer, this might be, I don't know, kind of, you might be in like, whether you call it the honeymoon phase or, just the stage where you haven't necessarily seen what I'm going to call strong differentiating feedback, right? Where somebody is being with what is, but their being with what is can feel a little bit kind of abrupt or disruptive, right? So what I'll encourage people to do, right, and this is just an invitation for kind of practitioners of the art, is to work within your own window of tolerance, okay, and within your group's window of tolerance, okay? And none of us are perfect. We don't always know what people can, hold or not hold. But, if you have a really strong piece of truth, and back in the day, I was really, I sound gentle now, but I've been a real, troublemaker at different points in my life, right? And, and I've spoken things that have been harsh, right? Without so much care or compassion for how it's received, and so, and I inadvertently still sometimes do this, right? And I feel badly when I do, but So, so this is always an imperfect art, but the whole notion here is to speak into the person's capacity to hear. Richard Heckler calls it speaking into their listening, right? So speak into their listening, right? Right. And sometimes there's this distinction between just expressing something to get it out versus communicating, right? And those are different things, right? I just want to like cathart it out versus I want to share this with you, right? Because I want you to know this, and maybe because you're actually important in a certain way to me, right? So so work within your window of tolerance and work within your group's window of tolerance, and I'll say, I guess this is also, I don't know if it's a too sophisticated of a notion, but this comes from something called emotion-focused therapy, okay? And they have this notion of primary versus secondary emotions, okay? Secondary emotions being, things like kind of, anger or kind of just the harder emotions, right? Like more harsh emotions that are actually defenses against the more primary vulnerable emotions. Okay, so softer emotions, maybe like sadness or fear, right? And the research shows that if you want connection, right, see if you can drill down into the primary emotions, like what's underneath that anger, what's underneath kind of that defensive criticalness, right? It was interesting. I was at a Boulder tea group once, and I guess you separate out into different groups, and one group wanted to kind of, just study their relationship with anger. Okay, so they went off into one room in the house, and then everybody else did their own version of group, and then so we were in the middle of our kind of group, and then we hear like screams and shouts, probably from the anger room. And then for the rest of our group, we were like really traumatized, like even though it was just like screams and shouts from the other group. And so anyways, I guess the what I learned is that if, and not to say that there's not a place for anger, right? I think that, and we'll talk about that in a moment, right? I think there's, or some of these kind of more kind of boundary defining yang type emotions, and that there might be a framework for thinking about when a group can hold it and not break apart, not fractionate, not create that kind of, break. And again, I'm not saying that you have to not create breaks, because maybe that's, a choice, but that just that certain things will likely create that. Okay, but just that if you're looking for deeper connection, frequently, kind of vulnerable expressions, are more likely to create kind of connection. Kind of, I think Brene Brown talks about how vulnerability is like the glue. Vulnerability is the glue of connection. And that being said, sometimes people avoid a lot just by always characteristically going into sadness and they never express aggression, right? They're just like, they just feel, I'm sad, but, and they never let themselves kind of stand up for themselves or express anger. And so sometimes, you know, it can be good for them to express that too. So I just don't want to kind of negate that, but just acknowledge that sometimes kind of a container in order to hold stuff like this, it can just be a little harder. And here's a model for thinking about it. And I guess this will be maybe kind of the last main set of concepts. And that's this notion of, okay, let's see, okay, yeah, support resourcing. That's another concept within the trauma literature. Support resourcing, also known as ground of health. Okay, and I'll explain what that is. I think it's a concept that's not, I don't know. I mean, I think I learned it from Crystalline Dillon, who runs the Bay Area T Group. She got it from Matrix Leadership. And I think they also use it in the Bay Area circling communities sometimes, but not always. So the notion is support resourcing or ground of health, okay? Resourcing is a trauma term that basically refers to, you know, if you are outside your window of tolerance, right? Resourcing is what helps bring you back down in, okay? So if you see somebody kind of edging out, or if you're edging yourself out, right? See what you can do to see where's a friendly face, or where is friendliness, and can I downregulate myself, or can I help downregulate the group into this, if you want to work in a trauma kind of conscious way, right? So that's what I would kind of recommend. So that's what resourcing is. Now, that doesn't mean groups have to be bland or boring. And here's a diagram that kind of goes along with that. So the notion here is, again, so this is kind of level of activation. I think sometimes Sarah Ness talks about mild, medium, or spicy, right? You know, how intense the group might be, you know, and then this would be called ground of health, right? Kind of, or resourcing, okay. I just want to I know I haven't been paying attention to the chat. It's just a little bit, oh, okay, people are with it mostly. Okay, all right, good. Yeah, so here's the notion. Okay, so here's, so ground of health, that's also psychological safety, okay? Okay, so that's code for psychological safety, and I know, which basically means the capacity to say or do what you want, or say or do in group or with another person without fear of humiliation or shame. Okay, so the more psychological safety, resourcing, ground of health that a group has, the more activation it can manage, right? So, so introductory groups typically stay in what I would call the shallow end of the pool, right? There's not that much safety, but people don't, you know, people are polite, they might not take a lot of risks, okay? So it's, you know, it works, but it's kind of like, you know, you're not really saying anything that's super activating or challenging, right? Because you don't have the psychological safety to support it. But once you've kind of built up psychological safety in a group, right? Then you can kind of say some really hard truths. Like if I really know somebody well, I can tell them, right, when you do that, I feel like throwing up, right, or whatever that might be, you know, or you can tell them something really maybe more difficult or differentiating, but because there's that underlying psychological safety and they know that you're there or connected with them, they're able to take it and not fear like abandonment, right? So it's really important to create kind of psychological safety if you want to go to higher levels of activation, right? And then once you're there, kind of you can just play in that zone, you know. And if you're in this territory over here, the group becomes overwhelmed, right? And it, you know, and then there's the chance of group splitting and potential trauma. And over here, it might be a little bit too, you know, for people, it might be a little boring and not as interesting, perhaps. Okay, so yeah, so those are kind of some main thoughts. And then the question is, how do you create psychological safety, right? So if you're a member of a group, notice the pipes that you have with each person, okay? And as you kind of connect with people and give what you might call appreciative feedback, you know, not made up kind of nicey stuff, but just genuine. When I see you, I feel kind of, you know, I see your smile and I feel a little happy. Okay, there's a little bit of a line that starts to happen. And then as people in the group start to express those appreciative, connective commentaries, right, the group starts to feel kind of connected and resonant, right? And then you can start to go to these upper levels of activation. Then you can start to do that. If you try to do that too early, it's like dropping, and this is Crystal and Dylan's analogy, but it's like dropping a rock into a wet paper towel. It'll just kind of break the group. It'll just go straight on through, right? Right, and so because the group hasn't formed yet, it busts open the group, it fractionates the group, right? And so kind of creating this ground of health or relational connection is really important prior to going to the far edges of psychic, you know, kind of psychological kind of experience. So, all right, let's see. Well, let me just pause for a moment and then, oh, phew. Okay. So we're almost at time. And what I'm wanting to do, I think, is just close, with a little poem. And then we'll let you guys kind of go into your coffee break rooms and churn with this, okay? Yeah, I'm so, yeah. So yeah, I appreciate you guys listening. So yeah, here's a little poem. I wrote it this morning. We'll see how it lands. Okay. So each time I seek to connect, there is a double edge, right? Will it be different this time? Will I be known? Will I be seen? Will I be heard? Can I survive if not? Can I survive the opposite? Can I survive reaching for you and not finding you? Can my heart hold all of this, the terror and the hope? It will all tumble one day. This I feel. And yet I reach. And sometimes, maybe. Ah, yes, there you are. I have been waiting to find you for so long. Okay. All right. Well, there you go. Thank you so much for such a lovely being with you. And yeah, yeah, thanks for your practice and your dedication to connecting, even when it's scary, even when it's hard, and for being kind to each other, because I think everybody is trying to. All right. I'll hand it back over to, I don't know if Marcia or, yeah.
Yeah, it's still me. Yeah, I stayed. I was planning on going, but I stayed to listen. It was fantastic. Thank you so much, Albert, for what you shared. And yeah, we're just gonna take a moment now, and David is going to put us into these groups for our coffee break. So I don't know, Albert, if you're getting a lot of messages in the chat, lots of responses to the talk and to the poem, and general appreciation of you and your presentation.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
A few people asking for, can we get a copy of your poem? I don't know if you'd be able to post that maybe in the.
Sure. Yeah, I just wrote it today. But yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your work with us. To everybody, we've got 15 minutes now for you to connect and share a little bit. And this is really a space you'll be in quite large groups, but it's really a space to maybe share what has been stirred in you, what you're taking away with you. This is a really good way of actually kind of solidifying some of the things that have really touched you, also just to be witnessed in maybe what's come up for you, or just have a little chat over a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, depending on if it's not too late for that. So David, if you can just
go ahead and do that. So I'll just let everyone know the coffee break is only for 15 minutes. If you know that you're not going to participate and you want to drop off now, I'll create the rooms, and that way the rooms will only be created for people who are staying for the coffee break. It's just really informal time to chat. At the end of that, we'll come back in the rooms and I'll dismiss you. The next practice session is in 30 minutes. And so we'll end this session in 15 minutes after the coffee break. I'm creating the rooms now, and I will see you all in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy. Right, I'm off to bed.
All right. You have a good evening. All right. Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
So I'm going to allow participants who are left here to unmute themselves. One moment. Let me do that. And if you have questions, you can ask me. Okay. Now you're able to unmute yourself if you have a question for me, or if you don't know how to go to the chat room. There won't be anything else here in the main room. The main presentation is complete. So I'm happy to entertain questions or help you with anything that I can. Gabby, if you're just joining, we've completed the main session. There's just if you wanted to be added to a coffee break room, I can do that. And June and Laura as well. We've completed the main presentation. There's a coffee break continuing for another 8 minutes or so. If you wanted to be added to one of those, if you add it to the text, or you can unmute yourself, and I can assign you to a breakout room for the coffee break discussion.